The water in this pit has been climbing for 44 years, and the only thing holding it back is a pump. Berkeley Pit, Butte, Montana, 1 mile long, half a mile wide, 1,780 feet deep. Roughly 50 billion gallons of contaminated water sit inside it, and every day, more seeps in. On Earth Day, 1982, the pumps that had kept this mine dry were switched off. The water began to rise, and it has never stopped. Up on the ridge above the pit, there is a man with a rifle. His job is to shoot at migrating geese before they touch the surface. In November 2016, 10,000 snow geese landed anyway. 3,000 to 4,000 of them died. But the dead birds are not the real danger here. The real danger is an invisible line, 50 feet above where the water sits right now, a threshold the EPA says this lake can never be allowed to reach. Because if it does, the contamination will not stay in the pit. It will reverse direction and push into the aquifer beneath Butte, into Silver Bow Creek and downstream into the Clark Fork River. No one can drain this pit. No one can neutralize it. The only option left is to pump it, treat it, and never stop. And the system built to do exactly that just had a wall start sliding toward it. A mile-long strip of water sits quietly in the middle of Butte, Montana, hemmed in by steep walls of rock and a chain-link fence. The surface looks calm, but warnings are everywhere. A sign at the viewing stand spells out the rules. No trespassing, no fishing, no swimming. The water is not just off-limits, it is off-limits for a reason. On the ridge above, a man waits with a rifle. His job is not to hunt, but to keep migrating geese from landing. The rifle is loaded with blanks, but the message is clear. If the birds touch down, they do not always get back up. In November 2016, 10,000 snow geese landed here during a storm. By morning, between 3,000 and 4,000 of them were dead. Their bodies were found along the shore, victims of water so acidic it burned through tissue in minutes and carried metals like copper, arsenic, and zinc at levels that would kill almost anything. The Montana Department of Natural Resources keeps a log of every incident, and the numbers are grim. The rifle deterrent is now a permanent fixture, part of a routine that includes propane cannons, lasers, and a steady human presence. Still, the birds keep coming back. The pit itself is hard to ignore. It is half a mile wide, nearly 2,000 feet deep, and filled with 50 billion gallons of water that grows more toxic every year. The pumps that once kept this mine dry were turned off in 1982. Since then, the water has been rising, fed by groundwater and rain, carrying the legacy of acid mine drainage with it. The pit is not just a scar. It is a system that cannot be shut down. The rifle, the alarms, and the constant reminders are not about what you can see. They are about what you cannot. The real threat is invisible, sitting 50 feet above the waterline, waiting for a moment when the machines stop working and the chemistry of the earth decides what happens next. In 1955, Anaconda Copper Mining Company began transforming Butte's underground tunnels into the vast Berkeley Pit. By the early 1960s, the pit stretched a mile long, half a mile wide, and mining continued for decades. When the last pumps shut down in 1982, water started to rise, but it wasn't just water. Rain and groundwater filtered through fractured rock, reacting with exposed pyrite and other sulfide minerals. The result was acid mine drainage, a toxic mix of sulfuric acid and dissolved metals like copper, arsenic, and zinc. The pit became a reservoir of contamination, its chemistry growing more dangerous as the water climbed higher. Scientists and engineers, using decades of hydrologic data and computer models from the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, mapped how water would move through the fractured ground beneath Butte. In 1994, the EPA set a strict limit. The water in the pit could never rise above 5,410 feet above sea level. This is the protective water level. If the water climbs higher, pressure could force acid mine drainage out of the pit, contaminating the aquifer, Silver Bow Creek, and the Clark Fork River. The real danger comes at 5,460 feet, the gradient reversal point. Cross that line and the flow reverses, sending toxic water outward. The 50-foot buffer between these two levels is narrow, just the height of a two-story building. Billions of gallons hang in the balance. That is why perpetual pumping is mandatory. This is not a temporary solution. It is a permanent responsibility, written into law and routine. Anaconda, ARCO, and later BP may have changed names, but the obligation remains. Every part of the cleanup depends on keeping the water below that line. Ownership of the Berkeley Pit's liability has changed hands more than once, but the financial obligation has only grown. When Anaconda Copper sold its Montana assets to Atlantic Richfield Company in 1977, it handed over not just a mine, but also a future environmental bill. By 2000, British Petroleum acquired ARCO, and with it, the full burden of the pit's cleanup. The Environmental Protection Agency had already listed the site as a Superfund in 1983, locking in federal oversight and a legal framework that would outlast any single company. Settlement after settlement followed. In 2002, BP, as ARCO's parent, signed an agreement with the Department of Justice and the EPA for $87 million to fund pump and treat operations and reimburse cleanup costs. Over the next 2 decades, additional agreements and court orders pushed the total liability well past $1 billion, a figure that includes not only direct payments, but also long-term operating commitments and financial assurances for decades to come. The Superfund mechanism makes this obligation permanent. Under federal law, BP and any other designated responsible parties must keep funding the continuous operation of the treatment plant. These are not one-time payments or temporary repairs. The cost of keeping the pit's water below the protective level is built into the legal structure enforced by consent decrees and monitored by the EPA. As a result, the cleanup has become a perpetual line item, an environmental mortgage with no final payment date. The machinery that holds the Berkeley Pit in check is not theoretical. It is physical, humming, and always running. Since October 2019, the Horseshoe Bend treatment plant has been the centerpiece of this operation. Here, toxic water is pumped from the pit and moved through a 2-stage lime neutralization process. The first stage raises the pH, forcing dissolved metals to settle out. The second stage brings the water closer to neutrality before it is released downstream, always under the watch of a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. The plant is built to handle surges with a design capacity of up to 10 million gallons per day, though typical volumes are lower. This system is not on autopilot. Operators monitor every reading, water level, flow, chemical composition around the clock. The Pitwatch Consortium publishes these numbers for the public, showing a water level that has remained steady at 5,356 feet above sea level for 4 years. That is 54 feet below the EPA protective line. The data are not just numbers, they are the daily report card that says the system is holding. Behind the machinery sits a legal structure just as rigid. In April 2020, the Supreme Court ruled in the Atlantic Richfield decision that only the designated responsible parties under EPA supervision can manage or alter the cleanup. This keeps the system locked into federal oversight with strict alignment to the original settlement. The treatment plant, the monitoring, and the water level itself are now permanent fixtures, evidence of a deadline that has been replaced by endless engineering. In early 2026, the north wall of the pit shifted nearly half a meter. That movement forced engineers to shut down the main pump station, cutting capacity by about 30%. Emergency crews stabilized the slope with soil nails and grouting, but the incident revealed just how fragile the system has become. Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology memos projected that, if pumping failed completely, it would take only 4 years for the water to hit the protective level. The language in official reports quietly changed from critical to protective, a subtle reminder that the margin for error is measured in feet and years, not decades. The pit's fate now rests on a machine that can never be allowed to stop. Beneath the surface of the Berkeley Pit, something unexpected has taken hold. In the late 1990s, Montana Tech researchers Andrea and Donald Steyerle began collecting samples from the pit's acidic water. What they found was not a lifeless stew, but a thriving world of extremophiles, microbes adapted to conditions that dissolve metal and burn through tissue. Among these, a species of protozoa called Euglena mutabilis survived at pH levels most organisms cannot tolerate. The Steerles isolated a compound from one of these acid-loving fungi and named it berkelic acid. In laboratory tests, berkelic acid showed selective activity against certain cancer cell lines, hinting at a potential medical use born from a place of contamination. The pit's legacy is not just toxic water and endless machinery, but also a reminder that even in the harshest environments, life finds a way to persist, and sometimes to surprise. Measured in decades, acid mine drainage keeps the Berkeley Pit on life support. The cleanup is now a permanent fixture, not a finish line. As infrastructure ages, the liability outlives every company. The EPA Record of Decision spells it out in plain text.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button in the middle for more corporate negligence, environmental health disasters, and abandonment stories from across America and beyond.